went well through the early 1900s at least. But yeah, the guy that originally invented it, I did a little bit of reading, and a lot of people think it's a parlor trick. They think that someone's subconscious is expecting a response, and they don't even know that they're moving the planchette, but they're moving it. And I've heard too many stories about people that have used an Ouija board and had some really negative experiences after that. I've heard of people, of course, a lot of it's kind of the typical reports that you get about people or from people that use the Ouija boards. But I've heard of people getting scratched, waking up. One guy said that he used one time and he would wake up with scratches on him, and the board was under his bed, so he took it and threw it away. And then he woke up with these burning scratches the next night, and there was the board back under his bed. And, I've heard reports of people having trouble getting rid of them. And they've even done investigations at houses where one lady in particular used one when she was a kid, when she was like 11, 12 years old, and she was now in her 50s. And her parents' still lived in that house, was still haunted by some dark entity to this day. Even her parents were seeing this thing walking around. They'd catch a glimpse of this, dark figure just passing out of the corner of their eye or walking across the kitchen. So I've heard a lot of reports from stuff happening from people that use the Ouija boards.
Yeah, I've read a scientific report was done on it about how the pancetta and the Ouija board, and basically, like you said, they mentioned about the subconscious mind drawing to the fact of the letters and whatever. But also, there was some parts they could not explain. But I thought it was interesting that scientists actually did research on it, because I like that. I don't mind if they could be wrong, but I think that's important as well.
Me too, absolutely. And I'm one of the first people that I maintain a certain level of skepticism about things. So if I hear something works or something can communicate with the spirits or something can be used in the paranormal field, I'll go to look up the skeptical point of view first and say, all right, what's the argument that says this doesn't work or that this isn't supernatural? And then I'll compare that to the argument that says it is supernatural. And there's a lot of cases where you can read things and the scientific explanation really seems logical. It seems like, all right, this is probably what's happening. There's some things like an Ouija board where just because of the negative connotations with it, I definitely wouldn't mess around with one, because I'd just be too concerned with opening that doorway that I couldn't close, if that is possible. And like you said, I have heard of some strange things that they've done with them, where perhaps no one at the table knew the name that they came up with, but they came up with a name, and it ended up being someone that was tied to that property or tied to that house. So it's yeah, I guess I'm on the line for sure. I just wouldn't mess with it, because I wouldn't want to take the chance, after all the negative reports.
Now, when people talk about seeing ghosts, there's quite a few different things people come across. There's the playback theory. I can't remember its name now, where basically you watch, and like you say, somebody like soldiers walking past, and there's the
Right.
experiencing a ghost up close and personal. What's your personal theories?
Well, I think the two, I will say, I guess to go down into the two categories, the ones that we deal with the most are residual hauntings and intelligent hauntings. And the residual hauntings, they seem to be spirits that they don't interact with people. They can't see people. It's kind of something replaying itself. For instance, where people have been out at Gettysburg and they saw this battle going on and they thought it was a reenactment. They went back to the Park Service and said, wow, that was an awesome reenactment. And the people say, well, there was no reenactors out there on the field. So they witnessed this whole battle replaying itself. And kind of like the funeral that I mentioned in Yorktown, These would be residual hauntings. And my theory, or I guess it's a theory, is that when these events happened, the emotion and such was so strong and the atmospheric conditions were just right that these images were kind of able to burn themselves onto the atmosphere. And when the conditions are right, they can replay themselves. And these residual hauntings can come as something visual, it can come as a sound, it can come even as a smell. For instance, when someone has a house that they hear footsteps walking up the hallway every night, at the same time, like clockwork, seems to be residual haunting. It never interacts with them. But then on the intelligent haunting side, this would cover most of the other types of cases that we deal with. And these spirits interact with people. Maybe if it's something malevolent, it'll scratch people. Um, Sometimes it'll make itself known by knocking things down or things getting thrown across the room. Uh, Sometimes people will hear them talk to them or say their names. And basically, like I said, the kind of spirit that interacts with people.
Now, I believe that our ability to interact with the paranormal or cryptids or UFO comes from early man, because early man had to be in tune with his environment and surroundings. And I think part of that is still in us.
Absolutely, and that's a good viewpoint because if you think about it, children are often sensitive, and a lot of reports, a lot of the calls that we get, people say, my child won't sleep in his room. He's seeing a man. He's seeing this. He's seeing that. He's seeing a figure in the doorway, and it's generally believed that children are more sensitive to the paranormal realm, the spiritual realm, because they're so accepting of their environment. They haven't been taught yet that, hey, this can't happen. So they believe it can happen. And that makes them a little more open to seeing things that those of us who are less in tune with our environment and our surroundings would kind of miss it.
Yeah, as I say, I just thought of that theory one day because I thought early man must have been very in tune with everything. And I do believe that I think scientists have proven that there is DNA in our body that is redundant or supposedly redundant, that they don't understand why we still have it.
And that's interesting. And that would make sense too with the Native Americans who were so spiritual, who, talked of so many spirits because they were very in tune with the environment as well.
Yes, early because they were early conservationists.
Absolutely. Right.
Which people forget.
That's right. They do.
Now, I read somewhere, and I don't know how true this is, when they do an autopsy, there is like a 20-gram difference, despite all the bits, where they've weighed the brain and the brain and the lungs and everything, and the water that leaves the body. But they cannot explain why there is this. I think it's 20 grams. I'm not too sure. Don't quote me on that. But there is a small amount difference in every autopsy that's done that they cannot explain. And people think that is the soul.
I've heard that. And that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to that possibility. Why not? Because if the soul's left the body, perhaps that energy, if nothing else, you know, energy weighs something.
Well, I had a sort of personal experience that because I used to work in care work. I used to work in mental health. And one of the ladies I had to go into the room for was unfortunately dying, obviously. But when she left, I could physically feel that something had left her body. I can't explain that. And most
Oh
people, when
wow,
they talk to them about that, they think, no, you couldn't have. No, you actually felt as if something left the body.
right, wow, yeah, that's interesting.
I have talked to other people who've come across this mostly in the care realm, obviously, because it's a fact of life, unfortunately. Um, and they have had similar like experiences.
Right.
It might be worth something you're looking into, Jeff.
Yeah, definitely would, and it's interesting because you think about when someone has a spirit in their house. Some people don't believe that it's necessarily the traditional human spirit of a person who passed and their spirit still lingers behind. Sometimes people are quick to believe that it's demonic or something evil or dark. And you would, if you think if the soul does leave the body and doesn't pass into the light, why couldn't it very well linger around or be drawn to a place where fond memories occurred, or even something very tragic that this person can't get over?
Well, memory's a good thing to have. And after the break, I think which is coming up soon. We'll go into a little bit of. I've got a little bit of theory that I would like to debate with you, and I'm going to ask you some questions about what is the scariest thing that you've ever come across in your investigations. So that gives you a little bit of time to think about it.
Sounds good.
And I think that people should know that it's that you say we should keep the historical element of the buildings up as well, because that's important. Because without, as you say, without the historical buildings, you can't do the research, and you can't find out about the ghosts or the stories behind the ghosts. Because some of these buildings, unfortunately, are dilapidated or not being looked after properly.
Right, right. Yeah, it's sad to see when, someone gets a historical building or some organization gets it and they just let it go to waste, because this is something that can't be recreated. It can't be brought back once it's gone. These buildings that were built a couple hundred years ago by people who lived at those times will never be able to have that back again once it's gone.
Yes, I mean, obviously in the UK, it's like a couple of thousand years old, in some cases. But
Right. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
because people, well, America technically is a young country, but it isn't really. I mean, obviously, the history before then isn't so well written as it was from like, I think you're 200 plus years old, is that correct?
Yeah, 1607 is when uh, the Jamestown settlers came over and established Jamestown.
So it would be
There was
roughly
a
200
Spanish,
years plus, yeah.
yeah, and there was a Spanish colony in St. Augustine, Florida, before that. But obviously, at that time, England and Spain were at war with each other. So um, for the longest time, the Spanish just had Florida, and for quite some time, as
Is it
what we know
still have
America as today
influences
came
today?
from the uh,
And the French as well. The French have been over
right,
in America because you've got French
right.
Quebec, not French Quebec. Oh, what's the place I'm thinking of? Anyway, you know because you live in America. I don't, but
Yeah, until like the Louisiana Purchase.
that's
Um,
it. That's the place
but
I'm in. Yeah.
there was, America as we know it today all stemmed from what the settlers did at Jamestown. It all came from there. That's where the government was established, and the first capital, and until it moved up to Williamsburg and eventually up to Richmond. So everything we know today came from the settlers at Jamestown.
Well, I did some over here in the UK. Holsworthy has a link to Australia.
Oh, really?
One of the local ladies that lived here. I cannot remember her name for life.